Welcome to Voice Rising with Kara Johnstad. Enjoy weekly conversations with leading luminaries, pioneering visionaries, singers, poets, musicians, and sound healers as we explore the profound role our voice plays on the path to self-realization and global enlightenment. The internationally acclaimed singer, composer, author, healer, recording artist, voice expert, creator of Voice Your Essence, and founder of the School of Voice, Kara Johnstad uses her extraordinary spiritual gifts to empower others. Everything in this world vibrates. Everything has a frequency. A pioneer in the field of voice work and transformational songwriting. Her breakthrough methods are helping thousands of people worldwide fine-tune their body-mind-spirit system and unlock the energetic frequencies of limitless creativity, health, and abundance. Share your voice, ask your questions, join in the conversation. Receive life-changing, positive transformation and rise together to create a sound world. And here's your host, Kara Johnstad.
Hello, beautiful souls. Our story today begins with the bone-deep metamorphosis of menopause, where transformation is not only possible, it is inevitable. And with me in conversation is the wonderfully enlightening, award-winning writer of fiction and nonfiction, psychologist, mythologist, truth-teller, and story keeper, Sharon Blackie. Sharon has just released a new book called Hagitude, Reimagining the Second Half of Life, and it is stunning and empowering, shape-shifting, and I have more questions than time, so you will truly need to buy this book. I'm normally not that bold, but this one you're just going to have to go and get. So may we all grow new bones and reclaim our unique voice, and I welcome you, Sharon, to Voice Rising today.
Thank you, Kara. I'm delighted to be back with you again.
I am so happy. I had the great pleasure to, read your book a little bit earlier on, and I read it as a ebook kind of thing. And then I was so lucky that I got a hardcover copy of it now, and I wish sometimes we were on video because the cover is so gorgeous. It's something, all of your books, if you hold them in your hand, anyway. But I'm going to start this show in a very crazy way because you have a beautiful poem which opens your book, and you're going to have to tell me the poet's name because I can't pronounce it, but the poem's called The Hag's Call by Kiatri. No, tell me,
No.
I have the letters here written, and I'm like, I'm not saying this right. Tell me her name.
Well, that's because it's in Irish, and the letters that are actually there bear very little relationship to the way you actually say the word. That's the language for you. No, her name is Katina Well-June.
Katina Well-June. I almost have it.
Katina Well-June, yeah.
Well, you see, my great-grandmother is Irish, and her name was Ernestine Young. So that one I managed. But anyway, probably it's not her Irish name. But anyway, this is my curious question. This poem opens your book, and it's on the first pages. And I'm, of course, in always search of the deeper understanding of my roots, and I have this burning question for you. And I'm not sure if you have the book in front of you. Otherwise, I have the first lines of the poem, and if you don't mind, I would simply read it and ask you my question. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's called The Hag's Call, and here it goes. She is the essence of the weather itself. She is the wind tearing violently at the roof, squealing on the old gate, calling down the chimney. She is my fear taking human form, calling into me tonight unexpected, seeking lodgings. Dressed in Kara Lalam, she torments me till at first sight of day she flees. Now this is only the first part of the poem, but what is or who is Kara Lalam asks you a woman called Kara who has not found this anywhere?
No, you wouldn't. Unfortunately, it's a little bit of a red herring, I'm afraid. It's just a person that Cathy made up in some other poem, which I have never read, and so I don't know. I don't know anything more about it than that. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, good. Well, I'll ask her then. So let's go a little bit further. The next lines in your book, you say, in the oldest known cosmology of my native lands, it wasn't a skybound old man with a beard who made and shaped the world. It was an old woman, a giant old woman, who has been with us down all the long ages since the beginning of time. So tell us and our listeners more about this woman and the native lands that you walk your feet upon every day.
Well, really, I'm talking here about predominantly the mythology of Britain and Ireland, although there are old women all over Europe in mythology. And so there is a tendency, really over the past couple of decades to imagine, or a few decades to imagine, that, we talk a lot about the Great Mother, that once upon a time Europe worshipped the Great Mother before Christianity. Yeah. But if you actually go back far enough, it was a Great Grandmother. So it tends to be old women who shape the world. So specifically in Britain and Ireland, which is what I'm talking about here, we have a wonderful old character called the Cailleach, which literally means old woman in Irish and in Scottish Gaelic. And she was a very wonderful character who really has been with us since the beginning of time. So we don't have in Irish and Scottish mythology like a creation myth of the universe. It just doesn't exist. It wasn't ever recorded. But we do have this creator and shaper of the land. And that's what the Cailleach was. She was almost kind of like a geological force, She had seen all of the ages of the world. So in one story about her, she says, when I was a young lass, the ocean was a forest full of trees. That's how far back she goes. But she is an old woman who not only kind of personifies the land, she is the guardian and protector of the natural world and the wild creatures that inhabit it. So she's a really, really good archetype for the times.
She's a very good archetype for the times. You woke up in 2018 with this crazy word, haggitude. Attitude of a hag. And what did you feel in that moment, seeing that, feeling it in your bones, haggitude, and which images did it invoke for you, or did it provoke, or did it conjure up?
Well, I did literally wake up in the middle of the night one time and I just pronounced the word Hagitude to the bedroom at large, and I went back to sleep. And I woke up the next morning thinking, that's a good word. That sounds like the title for a book. And to me, hags with attitude, I suppose it could be a contraction of that, but really it was about reclaiming the word hag. Now I know that particularly in America, it perhaps has slightly different connotations, where the word crone seems to be preferred for older women, whereas here in Britain, the word crone tends to be very, very kind of like wrinkly and ugly and a little bit kind of not really functioning in the same way, so maybe a little bit crippled or just very, very old, whereas the word hag has a little bit of a different meaning. So in the old stories, the hags in our oldest myths and folklore have a power of their own which springs from their absolute authenticity, from being absolutely who they are, sufficient to themselves. So they might be ugly, they might not be ugly. They always are older. But the point about the hag in the old stories is they don't define themselves in relationship to other people or in relationship to what the system would like them to be. So they're the ones who tend to kind of like ride out of the wildwood and tell the posh knight, exactly all of the ways in which he is going wrong. And so they tend to be truth tellers and a bit tricksterish. And, it's used as a negative term, I think, precisely because of that, because they live according to their own truth and their own rules, rather than going along with what the system or the patriarchy tells them they ought to be. So I liked the word because I think reclaiming a word that's been used against us and reframing it in terms of this authenticity can only really be a good thing.
I think it is a good thing. I also had images that were not always positive with the hag, but now I'm thinking of it's a hag with swag. It's like somebody who struts her stuff, somebody who's,
exactly.
And I think the authenticity, what I sensed, it's just, your book is so beautiful because you also did this. I mean, one of my favorite books of all times was your book, If Women Rose Rooted. And I told you that in the interview that we did a couple of years back on that book, is you have an ability to weave. Basically, what you're doing is, I mean, for me is, there's no chronological thing. It's like you're weaving the myths, you're weaving the stories, and you're weaving other women's stories in modern day stories of maybe friends that are, also approaching this time. Then you're weaving your own truth-seeking moments, and there's this kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like we're in the present moment, and at the same time we're rippling back through the ages. We're able to look at the patriarchy, the Christianity, which was burning witches also. So we have all these different layers, and in the end we come down to the essence of exactly that. What does it mean to come into this last stage of our lives where, especially as women, and this book is very much about women, right? Where we get to be absolutely our true essence, authentic, and everything. And I found that so interesting, literally burns away, which is no longer serving us. I mean, I never thought about it like that. You talk about, I mean, everyone says when they go through menopause, it's like, oh my God, I'm having my heat flashes. What this symbolically looking at it as like, what is burning rage, you talk about in your book, which we can go deeper into. But that is the gift, I guess, reclaiming this word, hag, and reclaiming this time of our lives. You also have this beautiful image on the inside cover about, now you can help me, but it's something about when everybody thinks we are going to get invisible or disappear or wither away, that's like our time to blossom, our time to be seen.
Yeah,
I'm
I
paraphrasing
think so.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, but to me, menopause definitely ushers in a new phase of life, a new journey, if you like, into elderhood. And I think of it as a kind of time between stories, when the old story, the kind of growing building that we do in the first half of our lives, fade away, and we make space to grow into a new one. Well, that space can be a very uncomfortable time with all of its symptoms and with all of the challenges that we face as women. But mostly when you talk to women about menopause, the one thing that you find shines through is this idea of fire, whether it's kind of psychological fire in the context of the rage or whether it's physical fire in terms of the hot flushes. But, you can argue that menopause is quite literally a bonfire of the vanities. Everything that you thought defined you, everything that you were attached to, your beautifully colored hair, your slim figure, your, all of those things just literally are stripped away. And so you have to step back and think, okay, if everything that I thought was important is taken away from me, or not everything, but many of the things, what's left? What is the essence that is left? And so the analogy that I use in Hagitude is that of alchemy, that we are in the crucible there, and that we are being stripped back, we're being burnt back to the essence of us, to the bones of us. And that's a time to ask ourselves, well, what am I? What is this for? And specifically, what are the last decades of my life for?
Yeah. To really become aware, right? Not to keep on trying to be younger, because death is going to come for all of us. And just to be conscious about it. I mean, you talk about you yourself sensing rage that you had never felt before coming up. And how was it for you? Was it like, I think I have it also buried somewhere, and I end up tapping into the deep sadness and the grief, and it's hard for me to get into that anger, right? But I'm sure it's there, right? But it's like we don't have permission, let me talk for myself. I don't want to talk for all women of the world, but it just seems like women in general are not really allowed to feel angry. And there's a lot to feel angry about. I mean, we were burned. We are oppressed. We do earn less money. We are not treated as fairly as men. We still have a lot of abuses and rapes and injustices. And yet somehow we are silenced still, right? So how is it for you during your time going through menopause? Or how did you manage that whole rage that came up and through you?
Badly, I think. Mostly. So as a child, I was not allowed to do anger because my father was violent to my mother when I was a child. And if I expressed, even just verbally, just a little bit of frustration, it was instantly, oh, you're just like your father. And so like many children, I learned to hold that in, for all of the different reasons that we learn to hold it in. I think you're quite right. As women, we do. And, I'd never really broken out at all. I just kind of internalized all of it. But during menopause, and the truth of it is, as is so often the case, I am a psychologist, I'm aware of all of this stuff, but I didn't really recognize what was happening to me. So all I just knew is that all of a sudden I was very much more volatile than I would have been before, and I just wasn't taking any crap from anybody, particularly from men, and particularly from younger men who always thought they knew more than I did about things that I had studied for years and got PhDs in, degrees in. It just kind of happened, and I wasn't really aware of it. It wasn't a choice. It just, I opened my mouth and stuff came out. And it wasn't kind of cruel or, profoundly dysfunctional. But all of a sudden, I found myself speaking the truth about what I was feeling and what I was seeing about how I was being treated as a woman, literally for the first time in my life. And it took me a long time to realize that this was what was happening, that it was because of menopause. But when I did, I started to talk to other women about it, I was fascinated by how for so many women that does define their experience of menopause. It's just as if a barrier has been burnt away, in this alchemical process that I was talking about, and all of a sudden it's not there, and you feel I think also that there is an important distinction to be made between just like rage, so somebody just makes you very, very angry and you just spout off stuff that isn't particularly constructive at them. What is more interesting to me is what I think happens particularly later in menopause, when that just rage at everything against the machine, if you like, turns into what I think of as righteous wrath, where you just get angry at things you really need to be angry about because they never should have happened in the first place. And so that kind of rage, that kind of righteous anger, if I could put it in that way, I think has a very constructive, or can have a very constructive function, where we just, we just say it, we call out what is not acceptable in the world. And we become truth tellers as a consequence, rather than just, angry, mad women as we're so often portrayed. That's a really interesting thing that I think happens, in the latter stages of menopause, where that rage turns to wrath.
Yeah, we name it. We name it like it is, right? There's no pussyfooting around. It's just, we're not, and the thing is, we have to understand too, like what happens, there's so much. I always talk about expression and depression being closely linked, right? There's so much illness, right, with also as women, and what happens. I mean, I ask that to you because you've worked with so many women, and you have so many beautiful groups, also online groups. There is also an online program which accompanies Hagitude, which accompanies this book, where we get to see all these stories that have been told about us. So what happens when we hold this anger in our bodies and it's not allowed to voice, it's a creative force that works against us, I'm assuming. And when we can start, and it's not only anger, right? I mean, we have also a lot of other deep, passionate emotions. It's just that anger is something that it's more taboo. I mean, I think, although I always say to people, you'd be surprised because, anger is taboo, but it's very hard as a woman to also walk. I mean, I know this because I sing a lot, I sing a lot, walking through the woods at the top of my lungs, and it's not accepted. Joy and bliss is also not accepted. Not really. It's accepted if you go to a discotheque or something, but it's not really accepted that we're dancing with the full moon and we're really in our juicy, happy flow space. I think we've been asked a lot to stay in the middle and not go too far in one direction. And that's, I think, menopause. Is that also your experience?
Yeah, indeed. I think so. I mean, I think anything that we're not allowed to express is going to come back and bite us. And to me, if we are able to work through expressing the anger in ways that are constructive. I mean, it may not be in the beginning. You just open your mouth and stuff comes out. But as you are allowed to express it, you're not just lashing out anymore. You're actually trying to change things with that anger, and so it becomes part of the transformation. That in itself becomes an alchemical process, so that what would initially be just a really kind of like rage-filled reaction turns into a genuine truth-telling situation where you're not trying to lash out, you're not trying to hurt, but you will not be silenced. You will tell all of the things that are wrong with the way that women are treated, with the way that the world is treated, and so on.
And our disconnection.
Can be constructive. Yeah, disconnection, for sure. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, and our disconnection also from the earth. I was thinking about that while reading your book. I thought, my goodness, we're not only all born from a mother. As far as I know, biologically, we all start as women, and then later we go into, who's male, who's female, right? But this feminine quality is in all of us, all of humanity in our bones. And we are conditioned to cut ourselves off from that nurturing, caring quality. Now, some people out there are going to say that's not true, but the fact is we have never been as disconnected as now from our planet, from the source that gives us the rain and the water and the sunshine, and there's no gratitude in. Someone was saying this on another show. It's like in all the major religions, there is very, very few that are going to say we honor the sky and the trees, right? It's
right. I mean, it's clearly that over the centuries, over the past couple of millennia, religions have moved from the sense that the divine is immanent in the planet, is part of the planet and our experience of the planet, to transcendence. Only kind of removing yourself from the physical is a good thing. And the ancient philosophies and spiritualities and cosmologies of Europe tell us very clearly that we came into a physical incarnation for a purpose. We came to learn from the physical incarnation. So why these religions try to persuade us that we would want to spend our lives trying to supersede that, it just makes no sense to me at all. It's about the physical incarnation. It's about all of the contradictions and all of the messiness and all of the beauty that's interwoven with it, and trying to learn to keep all of that in balance. But, trying to transcend the physical, I don't think really is wisdom at all. I think we have to embrace it and learn to live with it and learn what it is to be embodied in the face of all of the multitudinous challenges that we are facing right now.
Yeah, you work a lot with stories. You are very well known for knowing also using many of the beautiful myths and many of the fairy tales and folk tales. And these stories have literally shaped us. They shaped our sense of the world. What are some of the stories that we have been told or that we tell each other about women and aging?
Well, I do believe very strongly that the way in which we think about growing older depends upon the stories we tell about growing older. So how we think about aging women depends on the images that we hold of them. And the images we hold of aging women today really aren't healthy. There's, we use words like elderly. There's a tendency, rather than elder, there's a tendency to ridicule, to ignore, or to encourage us to shut up and let everyone else do the talking. And if you look at the terminology that we use, I don't know what it's like again in America, but in the UK, we talk about old bats, old trouts, little old ladies in a disparaging way. And so going back to these old stories gives us quite a different perspective, because we have these hags who are powerful, not because someone has granted them power, but because it just springs up from them, from who they are, from their authenticity. And like all stories, these old stories help us to reimagine ourselves. We see the possibility of transformation even in the most seemingly impossible situations. We see how other people do it. And they teach us that we can have agency. We have the power to change and influence the world for the better. They give us an insight into what the nature of an elder woman's wisdom is, and how we could, each of us, uniquely embody it. And that really is the key question at the heart of Hagitude, how an exploration of these wonderfully vivid and diverse archetypal characters in our old fairy tales and myths can help us to kind of recreate a map of what it is to become a good elder and have a meaningful elderhood.
Yeah, I think that is, we're going to come to that in a minute, but right before we go into the break, I do think that these old stories hold these precious secrets, and yet I wanted to ask you, in the stories that are now being played out, we have something which is known as like the dead mother plot. I don't know if you've, I'm like, what is with this? I was thinking of all these stories. I don't know all the older stories that the fairy tales, but I was thinking of Nemo, the mother's dead. Babar, the mother is dead. Bambi, the mother is dead. It goes on and on. Chicken Little, Aladdin, Little Mermaid. There's just so many films where there are no women and the child is abandoned, and then I guess the male prince is going to be the big hero. But these are the stories that the children are now learning and listening. And there's the stories that I'm thinking of too. I was like, Little Red Riding Hood. Where was her mother while she was alone in the woods? And the grandmother's getting eaten by the wolf. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like I'm looking for those older stories maybe, because I couldn't find that many modern stories that showed wise, beautiful women giving their knowledge to their children.
Yeah. I mean, the disappearance of the mother archetype is a little bit different. We can perhaps come to that after your break.
Okay. All right. We're going to take a short break. Thanks for your patience, Sharon. I'm exploring this with you in depth. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
The cutting edge of conscious radio. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organisation, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
With happy clients all over the world, Kara Johnstad knows that your voice is the missing link to more authenticity, abundance, creativity, and health. An internationally acclaimed voice expert, Kara's breakthrough methods have helped thousands of people successfully heal their voice wounds and extinguish the story of self-doubt and shyness forever. Join in group trainings, attend online sessions, schedule one-on-one time, and invite Kara to work with your organization and community. Get started today. Go to www.karajohnstad.com and receive a special guided meditation designed to fine-tune your inner voice and welcome you on the voice journey.
This is Kathy Beal, host of Celestial Compass, featuring astrology you can use. Celestial Compass points you to what's going on in the sky and what you can do with it down here on Earth. We also explore fun, effective, and cosmic tools for navigating this adventure we call life. Join me the first and third Monday of the month at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for Celestial Compass. It's enlightening, entertaining, and empowering.
If I could be you,
and you could be me for just 1 hour,
if you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind,
walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back to Voice Rising. With me is award-winning writer, creatrix Sharon Blackie, who loves to radically rewrite the future for women in their mid and elder years. And all I can say is we adore you. Thank you for your work. It is really, we do get different images. You were talking about archetypes. I'm already seeing myself like walking with roots deep into the earth and then rising like a giant. You know, every time I think of if women rose rooted, and now I'm working on my hag attitude. Talk about the archetypes. Are archetypes important for bridging the personal to the universal, or why do archetypes work so beautifully to awaken things in our subconscious, superconscious beings?
Oh, precisely because of what you said. They do bridge, the universal and the personal. So the hag might be a universal idea, but how is it for you? Or as I ask the question in the book, what is your inner hag? What does that new story post-menopause look like for each of us? Because to me, that stage of life is one where we really come into our own, our kind of truest, most authentic self, if you like, where, again, we don't define ourselves by relationship to others or by relationship to the system. And I think of that self, that truest, most authentic self, as our inner hag. It reflects the essence of who we are and the unique gifts that we bring to the world. So is it truer to your nature to be a fairy godmother kind of hag, a mentor to others? Is it the truth teller? Is it the trickster, the cultural disruptor, the wise woman, the Kaliach type of guardian and protector of the land? And these are all characters. These are all roles for older women, which show up in our oldest myths and fairy tales. So you can kind of take your pick. And although, as you were saying before the break, older women might not be upfront, super visible in our stories. They're not necessarily the protagonists. Nevertheless, they are always the ones pulling the strings. They are always the ones who see the bigger picture, who know exactly what it is the heroine or the hero has to do to prevail, who knows exactly what gift must be placed in their way for them to prevail. So they really, really are very important characters, even if they're not the ones that the story appears immediately to be about.
Yeah, that is one of the key points, I think, to realize that it looks like it's about the princess and the prince, but it's actually the wise woman in the little cabin in the woods who's deciding the fate of what's going to happen in this story. And I thought it was interesting. Let me see if you talk about the word weird, right? Weird. And a lot of people think of, I mean, they definitely think of me like this, but weird. Like we become a little bit weirder when we get older because we don't really care. We don't really care if we're wearing 2 sweaters that don't match and a pair of thick wool socks and looking a little bit disheveled, maybe. But in the Old English, the word weird, I believe, meant fate, meant destiny. So somebody who was weird maybe was someone who was connected to the fates. So share with us a little bit more about being weird and weirdness and how the roots of the word.
I think the way that people would tend to use that very old word today is a sense of being connected to what we might call, in British and Irish mythology, the other world. It's an awareness, it's an ability to kind of see beyond the veil, not to disregard the physical. The physical is absolutely the starting point, the defining point, but to look a little bit beyond it. And weird, yes, you're quite right, has a relationship to fate. But fate, in the Greek sense of the three fates, who were old women, in spite of the fact that in many artworks they're portrayed as younger women. I guess the painters like that better. They were old women in all of the texts. It wasn't about, dishing out destinies to individual human beings. It was about keeping the world in balance. And they kept the world in balance because they could, again, see the bigger picture. They could see beyond the purely physical into the other world. They could see all of the patterns, and they were weavers who wove the world into being. And in the Anglo-Saxon context, weird, W-Y-R-D, had exactly that connotation. Fate as keeping the natural order. So the three fates, if you took what wasn't yours, then you put the whole world out of balance. So they came in and they had to address that balance. It wasn't about punishing the individual. It was just that the world was out of balance. If you took what wasn't yours, if you took what didn't belong to you, if you took too much. And these women really were guardians, literally, of the balance of the cosmos. And that's what that concept of weird conveys. It's that ability to see that huge cosmic pattern, I suppose, if we want to be grandiose about it, and to know what needs to be done to keep everything in balance and harmony. That's what the old women did in the old stories.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, it seems that we really need to invite them back into 2022 and beyond, right? Because if you think
we just do with that,
that you have a very, very, very few holding the wealth as other people lie starving or, not well. And that being okay, they would probably shake it up. They would probably say that's not okay. We all have to have at least a loaf of bread, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And we are not, clearly, we don't have the big cosmic picture like the three goddesses, the fates did, but nevertheless, I think there is a kind of innate instinctual wisdom that when we are older bubbles back up to the surface. I think often we've spent years suppressing it because the system has told us that that's what we're supposed to do. The cultural mythology tells us we have to want certain things, we have to be certain things. And I think, again, that is one of the things that's burned away in menopause. So when we become older, all of a sudden we can see what is just kind of frippery and irrelevant and what is actually necessary. And because we have less to lose. I mean, we all have something to lose, of course, but we have less to lose as we get older. We're not in the mating game anymore. If we're going to have kids, we've had them. I think it's arguably easier to find the courage to be able to speak that.
It is arguably easier. There's so many things I want to dive into. What quality did you learn to honor the most during your menopause?
I don't know there was a particular quality that I think it really was a question of just asking myself what I wanted as someone who, has a naturally kind of caretaking nature. To just say, no, what is real to you? Stop living by somebody else's dreams. Stop taking not instructions from other people, but stop being whatever the culture wants you to be. What is the nature of your gift, and how can you best express it, either within or outside of the system as necessary? So I think that was probably the main thing. And I wouldn't say that it came to me very early in menopause. I think it was a consequence of several years of that alchemical process working at me, which was then added to when I was 60, so about 10 years into menopause, by a diagnosis of a very aggressive form of lymphoma, which untreated would have killed me, and a kind of walk through the valley of the shadow of death, as I put it in the book, which really enhanced that process even more. It's like I did it once during menopause, but then it came back around in a really big way at 60, where it's just like, no, what are you? What matters? You haven't got time for all of this stuff anymore.
Yeah.
You haven't got the energy. What is it actually that you need to be? Where do you need to be? What do you need to do? So I think really that's the biggest question of this early elderhood, if you like, time of our lives.
You talk about that you basically changed countries, changed homes, and we hit a pandemic. Then you, obviously in the middle of this move, how could you know that there's going to be a lockdown? Every country has different rules when they're locking down and not locking down. Nobody knows how long the lockdown is going to be. Suddenly you find yourself without a bed or without a food in the cupboard because the stores are closed. And then, all of these things that, again, strip us down. And then your diagnosis, where you had to walk through some very difficult times. And I mean, what I'm so amazed at is that in the midst of all this, burning and hoping and probably praying and all of this stuff, this book was written.
Well,
right? I mean,
I did feel as if so I had planned to write this book for a couple of years, when I was about 58 or thereabouts, or 57 perhaps, I started to plan it. And I did feel as if that big old hag in the sky had just taken me by the scruff of the neck and said, if you think you want to write a book about elderhood, I'll show you what elderhood is for. Here's the biggest initiation of them all. But again, it was an interesting lesson, again, when I look back at it. What did I need to learn and what did I need to let go of? So I am someone who really, for various reasons, childhood, the whole, palaver, has had a strong need to control my life. So it's not that I don't like uncertainty. It's not that I can't live with it, but I can live with it within certain structures that I have control of. And that whole period where, we landed in our new house on the first day of the first significant lockdown in the UK. I mean, you were not allowed out of your house without furniture because the movers didn't know that they could, whether or not they were allowed to deliver it, just in this old house where we had nothing, we knew nothing, followed by, a significant set of physical issues, followed by the lymphoma diagnosis. It was just like, okay, what you need to have stripped away from you is your need to control. I'll show you what it is just to have no control. What are you going to do? What are you going to be in that circumstance? And it was interesting because I found it, in the end, a gift. I did. That loss of control, that kind of just putting yourself up and just saying, okay, whatever has to happen here, okay. If I die, that's okay. I'd rather not, but okay. Coming to terms with that and not trying to manage my way through it as I normally would, but just kind of going with the process, seeing what happened with the chemotherapy and all of the negative stuff. And that was such a profound transformation for me. In spite of the unpleasantness, I really, really would not give it back to you. It was a gift. And it was what I needed to learn in order to go into elderhood with a little bit more authority, with a little bit more authenticity, with just that sense of, well, this is who I am. This is it. This is what it's for.
Yeah, this is it, right? I mean, that is clear. I mean, this is it. Is you stripped down to the essence and what you. Well, you have this a little bit. I know, because I do follow your work, and you used to say the bone cave. Let's go to the bone caves, and you have also the line in the book, which I love. Growing new bones. It's like just to allow ourselves to think as alchemists, to think of magicians, to think like we can, not only can we create it, but we can allow ourselves to be created. We can allow, that's what I hear when I listen to. It's like when you don't have the energy anymore, then you allow the breath to move through you and it carries you the next step, right? You're like, suddenly you see a I don't know, a leaf falling from a tree, and you understand that leaf is falling, just like you might be falling in that moment, but it's gonna, it's gonna turn into earth, and suddenly in spring you see a flower, and you're like, oh my gosh, life is there again. And it sounds like when we talk that everything is coming back so beautifully, even though it's fall. It sounds like spring, right? It's great to hear your voice.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm trying to. You tell me. I have a line here: loving the mystery, apprentice yourself to bewilderment, and the idea that women, we actually do want to get out of those functioning roles, and in our older years, maybe let ourselves be embraced by the poetry that surrounds us. And then I have another very big word called the witch wound, and how it is really part of our collective consciousness and it's really held us back. Which one would you like to speak on?
How about the first one for a little while?
Yes.
Because I think part of the problem that we face, women, at the moment in menopause, is that the culture is always the conversations that we have around menopause, and it hasn't been possible to have conversations in many countries for the past years. But in the UK, we're beginning to have more conversations about menopause, but almost all of them are focused on the same thing: hold on to that last, dark hair. Hold on to what the culture thinks of as beauty. Take HRT not to medicate really difficult symptoms, but to hold off the aging process. And so we're constantly being told that we must always be what we always were, that we must keep on keeping on and growing and, going for it. And the culture doesn't allow us that time to really embrace the time between stories. We're not allowed to stop. And I think it takes a great deal of courage or desperation, whichever comes first, for those women who just do step back and say, okay, this isn't, I can't. I can't. I have to just stop and see what comes out. So I think for me that is where the uncertainty, that is what I mean by sitting in uncertainty. We learn to embrace this time between stories as a pause, not just in our menses, but a pause in life. And we sit in the darkness, just not knowing what is going to happen, but we allow it. And then we make room, we make space for that new story to come into our lives. So I really wish that one of the things I wanted to do with Hagitude was to kind of get that message out there so that women who just feel that they cannot go on the way they were understand that doesn't mean that they are failing. It actually means that they are on the threshold of something that was meant to happen. It's meant to be a pause, So that's a real passion of mine, that women just understand that. I know not everybody can afford to, quit their job and just take time out, but there's always something that we can do to give ourselves time and space to just let this stuff happen.
Yeah, there's something probably to work in more of that meandering, to work in more of the, to allow ourselves just to get lost in a bookshop or to go to the river and, throw pebbles in or, or
to just sit and cry if you need to.
Or just sit and cry.
What's happening. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And to recognize that is natural. That's what our body is doing. And it's that cultural pressure to put a lid on it all and carry on as we always did that I think is part of the problem. But if we can learn to see this as a necessary, very challenging and often physically very uncomfortable, but necessary pause in our lives so that we can move on into this wonderful potential journey of elderhood to become who we were meant to be, not who the culture would quite like us to be, but, to really embody that unique gift that I truly believe everyone comes to this life with.
Yeah, and I was thinking when you said that, just to sit and cry without having to fix it or try to put a label on it, that's because of my childhood or my ancestors or my lineage or my husband or my, just to be like a rain cloud.
Yeah, not to
today
analyze.
I'm a rain
That's
cloud.
quite right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so many places to go. You have now released this beautiful book, and I really, I'm normally not doing these sales pitches on the interviews, but the thing is that the book is, again, it has so many layers. I actually enjoyed reading it the second time almost more than the first. It was interesting because the first time I was looking for, kind of interview things. The second time I really was able to, weirdly enough, be fresher, and I could hold it. And I guess I'm somebody who loves the tactile sense. I could hold it. It's a beautiful cover. Congratulations to your publishing house that they invested in a beautiful hardcover book. You can also get it as you can also get it as an audio, and you can also get it, I'm sure, as a paperback, but I would suggest everyone to get it as a hardcover because it just sits there, even if you take time to read it, and it's gorgeous. So you have the possibility that people come to your homepage, which is sharonblackie.net, and you're also starting to work with a group of women and sharing these stories. Is that right?
Yeah, so we have a year-long kind of membership program to explore these issues a little bit more clearly, and also to think very deeply. So not to follow the book. I mean, people can read the book. They don't need to do it in a membership program. But to think very much more deeply about what kind of resources we need, in order to change this story, in order to change this cultural story and create a better one. What are the stories that we need? How do we seed them out into the world to younger women, to prepare themselves? What are the rites of passage? What are the vision quests that we need as older women? How do we become a good ancestor? So, to ask a kind of, what is our legacy? To ask a bunch of questions that arise at this time in our lives, make it specifically about women, and to have a conversation, have a community who basically comes up with I wouldn't say a plan, but it's not, it's nothing quite as structured as that, but just to say, okay, how do we do this better?
How do we do this better, and how do we plant seeds that are going to go out there? Sharon, I thank you so much for being with me here today. Again, wishing you much, much success. I'm so happy that your health is back on track and that you're able to bring your gifts out into the world. You teach us so much. You give us so much. And I thank you again.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to have had another really deep conversation with you, Kara. I really appreciate it.
So bye-bye, and and again, much success. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
It takes a change.